Today, we take a look at Karens who died because they refused to listen. From a Karen who ignored safety rules in a roller coaster for the perfect selfie, to a homeowner who dismissed a trained electrician and attempted a repair after watching a video online, unaware of how quickly it would all go wrong. It was May 2019, Manchester, England, a public parking lot outside a retail complex on a busy Saturday afternoon. There were people moving through the area in both directions. It was the kind of place where small disputes happened and usually came to nothing. Donna Hale was 39. She worked as an administrative assistant and had a pattern of using physical confrontation to settle minor disagreements. She had slapped her ex-husband during an argument. She had done the same to a co-worker and to a family member on separate occasions. None of those incidents had resulted in serious consequences for her. Physical confrontation, in her experience, was something people backed down from. It had always ended there. That afternoon, she had been circling the lot for several minutes looking for a space. When one opened up near the entrance, she moved toward it and began reversing in. A man came from the opposite direction, pulled straight in from the front, and took it before she could complete the turn. He got out of his car, locked it, and walked toward the retail entrance without looking back. Donna got out and went after him. She caught up with him near the entrance and told him directly that she had been waiting for that space and that he had no right to take it. He did not respond. She told him he was not allowed to simply ignore her, that there were cameras in the lot and that she could report what he had done. He turned and tried to walk away. Donna positioned herself in front of him as if she had every right to stop him from leaving. He stopped, said nothing, and waited. Then he tried again. She blocked him a second time. A bystander nearby told her to leave it and let him go. Donna turned to the bystander and told him to mind his own business, that this had nothing to do with him. Then she turned back and kept going. What she did not know was that the man had recently been discharged from a psychiatric unit and was in the middle of adjusting his medication and treatment plan. He was not being passive out of weakness. He was actively working to stay disengaged. He had tried to remove himself from the situation more than once and had not been allowed to. He stood still, said nothing, and kept his reaction contained for as long as he could manage it. On his third attempt to pass her, she slapped him across the face. The slap was the trigger. Whatever regulation he had been maintaining collapsed in that moment. The response came immediately, and it was a single strike, but it landed with a force Donna had not anticipated and had no frame of reference for. She had done this before, and nothing serious had happened. This was not that. She went backward fast, and her head hit the pavement hard. She lost consciousness on impact and did not recover it at the scene. Witnesses moved in immediately. Someone called emergency services and others stayed with Donna until paramedics arrived. She was transported to hospital and admitted directly to intensive care. She was placed on a ventilator. A neurosurgeon performed emergency surgery to relieve the pressure that had built up inside her skull from the impact. The surgery bought time, but it did not change the outcome. Donna did not respond in the days that followed. She remained in a coma. Her family stayed with her. She did not regain consciousness. Donna Hale died from a traumatic brain injury caused by the fall. She was 39 years old. The man remained at the scene after the incident. He did not attempt to leave. He was taken into custody and later charged. Court proceedings included a full psychiatric evaluation. Medical evidence presented during the trial established that his capacity for self-regulation had been significantly compromised at the time of the incident as a direct result of his psychiatric condition and the disruption to his ongoing treatment. The jury accepted the evidence. The charge was reduced to manslaughter. He was not sentenced to a custodial term. A hospital order was imposed requiring him to remain under psychiatric supervision and continue treatment. It was January 21st, 2018, Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia. An amusement park on a busy summer morning. The roller coaster used a standard chain lift system with lap bar restraints. It was one of the most popular rides in the park and had run without serious incident for years. Vanessa Clark was 36. She worked as an event planner and cared deeply about how she appeared to others. Her social media was carefully maintained and she treated every outing as a chance to capture herself in the right light. She had recently finalized a divorce and chose to spend the day at the park alone to mark the occasion. She arrived expecting everything to go exactly as she had planned. Her behavior towards staff started at the first ride. The queue was long, and she asked to be moved to the front. She said she had paid for a full-day ticket and did not see why she should be treated the same as everyone else in line. When the staff declined, she asked for a supervisor. The supervisor gave the same answer. She criticized the system, saying other parks handled it better. then walked away, still talking. At the roller coaster, signs at the entrance clearly prohibited selfie sticks and loose items. The ride operator repeated the rules out loud before boarding. Hands inside, stay properly seated, keep the lap bar down at all times. When asked to store her bag, Vanessa brushed it off. Confident she already knew how rides like this worked, she stored the bag but kept a small, collapsible selfie stick concealed along her side, out of the operator's direct view as she took her seat. When the operator moved along the car to check restraints, he performed a quick visual pass, confirming each bar appeared locked without applying additional pressure. Vanessa pulled the lap bar down once until it clicked and gave a brief nod before he reached her fully. The bar sat lower than ideal, leaving space between it and her thighs, but it appeared secured at a glance. A tighter position would have restricted her movement, so she left it as it was, and the operator continued down the row. She treated the instructions as unnecessary and focused on getting the photo. As the coaster climbed the chain lift hill, she pulled out the selfie stick and extended it. She leaned forward over her knees and lifted her hips off the seat to frame the shot. As her hips rose, her thighs slid backward and down along the seat, creating clearance beneath the lap bar until it was no longer making contact with her legs. The bar stayed in position. Her body had moved away from it. She was no longer secured by the restraint. She braced against the footrest and pushed forward, shifting her center of mass toward the front of the car as the train approached the crest. As the train crested, her weight reduced against the seat, removing the last resistance keeping her in position. The nose of the car tipped down sharply into the descent. The forward rotation her own push had already started combined with the pitch of the drop. The lap bar was at her midsection, and her legs were no longer behind it. As the train tipped over the crest and began its descent, she was carried forward over the bar and out of the car. The coaster finished its run and stopped at the end of the circuit. Passengers got off and told staff what they had seen during the ride. Park staff responded immediately, and emergency services were called. Vanessa Clark was found on the ground below the track at the point where the descent began. She was alive, but unresponsive. Paramedics stabilized her at the scene, and she was transported to hospital where she underwent emergency surgery. She did not regain consciousness. Vanessa Clark was pronounced dead 18 hours later from traumatic brain injury and internal bleeding consistent with the fall. Investigators determined that Vanessa had deliberately left the bar with slack and had not followed repeated safety instructions given before departure. The park introduced mandatory lap bar checks before departure and tightened its loose item policy across all major attractions. It was June 18, 2017, Perth, Western Australia, a residential home in a quiet suburb. The kind of house that looked exactly the way an interior designer would want it to look. Clean lines, good furniture, everything considered. Melissa's husband was due back that evening for his birthday, and the house was ready for it. Almost. Melissa Grant was 39. She worked as an interior designer and had spent years developing a sharp eye for how things should look, and an equally sharp opinion about people who did not meet her standard. She had a particular dislike for being charged a premium by someone she felt was overstating the difficulty of a job. When a sparking wall outlet showed up that morning, she called an electrician. He came out, looked at the outlet, and gave her the price. She looked at him and told him directly that she had been in the design industry for 15 years, had managed entire renovation projects, and was not going to pay that figure for a job that any person with a basic set of hands could complete in under half an hour. She told him she hoped his next client was less informed. He did not argue. He picked up his bag and left. She closed the door and went to find her phone. She watched 2 videos. The first one walked through the correct process. Turn off the breaker, test the circuit, confirm no live current before touching anything. It was clear and thorough, and it made the job look like it required more steps than she had time for. The second video was shorter. The person in it went straight to the faceplate, pulled it off, and worked quickly without any of the preliminary checks. That was the version she needed. She noticed the setup in the second video was not identical to hers, but decided that was a cosmetic difference and not something that changed the fundamentals. The extra steps in the first video felt unnecessary for what she saw as a simple job. She had just sent away a qualified electrician, so she chose the second video. She did not go to the breaker box. She turned off the wall switch and moved on. She had watched someone do this without isolating the breaker, and it had looked fine. She removed the faceplate and exposed the wiring. Everything looked manageable. She worked through the steps with confidence, handling the wiring the way the second video had shown. At some point, she registered that what she was looking at did not match the video. The layout was different in a way she could not immediately account for. She paused on it, then decided it did not matter enough to stop. Her husband was due home in a few hours. The wall switch she had turned off controlled the outlet's function. It did not isolate the circuit. The wiring behind the faceplate was live. When she made contact with the live conductor, the current passed through her. The current caused her muscles to lock and her hand did not pull back. The current kept moving through her and she had no way to break free of it. Her heart lost its rhythm and could not find it again. Her husband arrived home to find the house quiet and the lights on. He called out for her and got no answer. He found her on the floor near the outlet, the faceplate still removed and the wiring exposed beside her. She was not responsive. He called emergency services immediately. Paramedics arrived and worked on her at the scene, but she had been there for some time before he found her, and there was nothing that could be done. Melissa Grant was pronounced dead at the scene. The cause of death was cardiac arrest caused by electrocution. The review confirmed the breaker had not been switched off at any point. The wall switch had been turned off, but that does not isolate the circuit, and the wiring had been live throughout. Investigators noted she had registered a visible inconsistency during the repair and continued anyway. The electrician she had turned away was contacted during the review. His quote had been standard for the work involved. It was August 14th, 2017. Birmingham, United Kingdom. A commercial car wash on a busy road on the south side of the city. You pull in, the machine takes over, and you sit still until it is done. That is how it works. Conveyor track, high-pressure jets, brushes, and big industrial dryers bolted at the end of the bay, at the height of someone sitting inside a car. Claire Hargreaves was 42. She owned a boutique in Birmingham and had built it up over years into something she was proud of. She liked things done her way, the shop, the staff, the details. She did not like being told what to do by people she felt were below her level, and she did not hide that well. That morning she had run into a woman she used to know. The woman had married into money, and it showed. Nice car, nice clothes, easy manner. Claire left the coffee shop smiling and furious, and the mood stayed with her all day. She got to the car wash in the early afternoon. The attendant had been working there for 11 years. Before she pulled in, he told her what he told everyone. Windows all the way up. Sit still. Hands inside. Do not touch anything once the cycle starts. Claire nodded and pulled forward with her driver's side window still open. She knew it was open. It was not an accident. She had looked at it and decided it was fine. She ran a business. She had dealt with harder problems than a little water coming into her car. The gap was small. The man in the vest was not someone she needed to take seriously. It was going to be fine. The rinse started and a thin line of water came in through the gap and ran down the door. Claire looked at it and left the window where it was. Fine. The conveyor moved her forward, and the jets came on. The high-pressure jets were not fine. The spray hit the open window directly, and water came through hard and fast. It soaked the door, the seat next to her, the controls on the inside of the door. It was loud and cold and completely different from what she had told herself it would be. She reached for the window switch, but water was already running down her arm and across the panel. She hit the switch late and it did not respond the way she needed it to. The water kept coming. She decided that trying from inside was not working and pushed her head and shoulders out through the window opening, one arm against the outer door, trying to reach and adjust it from the outside as water kept pouring in. The conveyor kept moving. There was no way to stop it or slow it down from where she was. It moved the car forward at the same speed it had been moving the whole time. The dryers at the end of the bay were big metal units bolted to the frame. They did not move, and they had no way of knowing anything was wrong. They were set at the height of a person sitting inside a car, because that is all they were built to deal with. Claire's head and shoulders were outside the car when the conveyor pulled her into that section. The edge of the housing caught her across the head and forced her sideways. The car kept moving into the fixed structure, with her body caught between the outer door frame and the dryer unit. It did not stop until the automatic trigger at the end of the bay cut the conveyor. By the time the car came to rest, Claire was partially outside the vehicle and unresponsive. The attendant reached her within seconds. She was breathing but not responding to his voice. She said something fragmented that he could not make out. Emergency services were contacted immediately. She lost consciousness before paramedics arrived and did not regain it. Claire Hargreaves was pronounced dead at the scene. She was 42 years old. She died from severe head and upper body injuries from the collision with the dryer housing while her upper body was outside the car. The investigation did not take long. The window had been open against clear instructions. The machine had done exactly what it was supposed to do. Claire had pushed herself outside the vehicle while it was still moving through an active cycle, and the system had no way to know that or stop for it. After the incident, the facility added a window check to its entry process. No car would go in until a staff member had looked at every window and confirmed it was fully closed. It was July 22, 2018, Calgary, Alberta, Canada. A public zoo on a warm summer afternoon. Families moved along the paths in both directions. The black bear enclosure sat along one of the main routes, fenced, signed, and built to keep a fixed distance between visitors and the animal inside. Cheryl Mason was 47. She worked as an office administrator and had spent the better part of the previous months buried in work that had ground her down. This trip was the first real break she had taken in a while. She trusted her own judgment and liked to feel in control of things. She had read before coming that American black bears were shy and non-confrontational, and had taken that to mean they were safe at close range if you stayed calm. A friend had told her that zoo animals were kept hungrier than they needed to be, and that the feeding rules were more about liability than actual risk. That stuck with her. When she reached the black bear enclosure, the animal was moving along the fence line in a loose pattern. She watched it for a moment and decided it was hungry. The way it was moving, coming toward the fence, it looked to her like something was looking for food. She opened her bag, took out a granola bar, and broke off a piece. The signs on the fence were right there. No feeding, no reaching through the barrier. She had seen them and kept walking toward the fence anyway. There was a corner seam where two fence panels met at a slight angle. The gap at that point was a little wider than the rest of the enclosure. Not broken, not a safety failure, just slightly wider than the panels on either side. Wide enough. She positioned herself there, leaned forward, and pushed her hand through the gap with the piece of granola bar held out toward the bear. The bear had already been drifting toward that section of the fence as she approached, tracking the food in her hand. Two staff members saw it happen at the same time from different spots along the path. Both started moving toward her immediately. One of them called out for her to stop. Cheryl turned toward the voice with clear irritation on her face. She told him to relax, that it was just a small piece, and that the bear was clearly hungry. The staff member repeated the instruction, louder this time. Cheryl did not move her arm. She said she was not hurting anything and that they did not need to make a scene. She stayed leaned forward with her hand still through the gap while she was saying it, as though the conversation and the feeding were two separate things she could handle at the same time. She was still holding the granola out when the bear reached through. The grip on her hand and lower arm was immediate. The force behind it was not something she could pull against from where she was standing. Already leaned forward with her weight toward the fence and nothing to brace from. The bear tore through the soft tissue of her hand and forearm before it released, and staff reached her. They got to her within seconds and pressed down on the arm and tried to keep her stable while someone called emergency services. There was a lot of blood. Other visitors nearby had stopped and were not moving. Cheryl was taken to hospital. The injuries to her hand and forearm were severe. The damage to the blood vessels and surrounding tissue was too extensive. She did not make it. Cheryl Mason died in hospital from the injuries she sustained at the enclosure fence. She was 47 years old. The investigation afterward confirmed the feeding signs had been clearly posted and visible. Cheryl had gone to the wider gap at the corner seam and pushed her hand through in direct violation of the posted rules. Staff had called out a warning, and she had responded without pulling her arm back, staying in position at the gap long enough for the bear to make contact. No fault was found with the animal or the enclosure design. The zoo modified the corner seam spacing across its enclosures after the incident, so that the wider gap at panel joins no longer existed. It was November 3, 2017, Surrey, British Columbia, Canada, an upscale retail store on one of the busier shopping streets in the city. The store had received a new full-height plate glass entrance door earlier that morning. It had been installed, cleaned, and left unmarked. From either side, it was completely transparent. Angela Whitmore was 38. She worked as a real estate consultant and carried herself in a way that made that clear in any room she entered. Appearance was not just a preference for her. It was a professional tool and a personal standard she applied to everything around her. She was known among staff at the stores she frequented as someone who expected a great deal and said so directly when those expectations were not met. Her personal assistant had resigned earlier that same day, the 10th person to leave that role in under 6 months. Each had described the same pattern. She called at odd hours, set impossible deadlines, and allowed no recovery time between tasks. When work was not completed to her satisfaction, she described the person as incompetent and unable to match her standards. She had gone through 10 assistants without adjusting her expectations once. Angela had come to the store alone that afternoon. The reason for the visit was specific. She had been informed she would be receiving a community contribution award and had decided the occasion required a new outfit. She arrived wearing a fitted two-piece suit and high stiletto heels, walked through the entrance, and went directly to the floor to begin selecting. She chose 16 items and moved to the fitting room. She informed staff that she was a VIP customer and expected priority treatment consistent with that status, and that the fitting room should be held for her exclusive use for as long as she needed it. When a staff member explained that the rooms were shared and other customers were waiting, Angela told her that she clearly did not understand who she was dealing with and that she expected the matter to be handled appropriately. Several other customers who arrived and waited for a room to become available eventually left without being served. During the approximately 70 minutes she occupied the room, she called staff in repeatedly, left items on the floor, and when one staff member suggested she was taking longer than expected, Angela told her she would leave when she was ready and not a moment before. While trying on one of the items, a new arrival that had come into the store that same morning and was among the most expensive pieces on the floor, the garment was damaged. Staff informed Angela that she would be required to pay for it regardless of whether she chose to take it with her. Angela looked at the staff member and told her she was out of her mind. She said she had no intention of paying for something she did not want and that she found it offensive to even be asked. She demanded to see the manager. The manager confirmed the store's position. The item had been damaged while in Angela's care and payment was required. Angela told the manager she was clearly not qualified for the role she was in. She said she was a well-known figure in the community, that she was wealthy, and that people like the manager should think carefully before deciding who they wanted to make an enemy of. She told her she would be on the phone to the corporate office before she reached the car park, and that both the manager and every staff member involved would answer for how she had been treated. When the manager held her position, Angela called her a wretch, told the staff around her they were an embarrassment to the industry, and said she hoped none of them planned to stay in retail long because they clearly had no future in it. No one responded. Angela turned and walked toward the exit. The manager called after her and told her to slow down on the tiled floor in those heels. Angela did not turn around. She did not acknowledge it. She pulled out her phone and began composing a formal complaint, her eyes fixed on the screen from the moment she started moving. The stiletto heels kept her stance narrow and gave her limited margin for any sudden shift in balance. The plate glass door was directly ahead of her, fully closed, completely transparent, and lacked the visibility markings required under applicable safety standards. She did not look up. Her upper body struck the glass at walking pace. The impact stopped her forward motion abruptly and sent a brief recoil through her body. She lost balance as her weight shifted backward, likely compounded by the narrow heel base. Her hands were occupied, one holding the phone, the other gripping her bag, and neither came free in time to break the fall. She went down backward and the back of her head impacted the tiled floor. She was briefly responsive in the seconds after the fall, speaking in fragmented words to staff who reached her immediately. Her condition deteriorated rapidly. Emergency services were contacted and she was transported for medical care. Despite medical intervention, she did not survive her injuries. Angela Whitmore was pronounced dead from traumatic brain injury, resulting from intracranial bleeding caused by the fall. She was 38 years old. Post-incident findings confirmed the plate glass door lacked the visibility markings required under applicable safety standards at the time of installation. The store was cited for the compliance violation. Corrective markings were applied to all glass entry points within the store before it reopened.